Welcome, everybody. My name is Jeff Malmgren. I do work supporting the primary care networks in Burnaby. This is a doc talk, what to do when your doctor retires. I think for many of us, we hear about the shortage of family doctors, and many of us see that our doctors are sometimes older than we are, or at least they're of the age where they may be thinking about leaving. And it causes us some concern, and certainly not unreasonably. But I think that what this session will bring you is really a physician's perspective on what that's like, and possibly give you some comfort around the kind of things that doctors think about to ensure that their patients still have support when they retire, and also the things that you should think about as a patient if you know that your doctor is planning to retire. We also have some folks from the Burnaby Primary Care Networks who provide services for both doctors who are in the process of retiring and also for patients who are looking for new doctors. And they'll be able to give you some information in the question and answer period when we get to that. I do want to say that this session is being recorded, and it will be available for you and for others to be able to see afterward on the burnabypcn.ca website, which is a great resource. It has a number of other, many doc talks which you can refer to, and there's a whole bunch of good information there, but also a number of other resources for health and wellness in Burnaby that I think you might find valuable. Again, if you have questions, you can put them into the Q&A, into the question piece. Please feel free to put those in as many as you like and when you like. We'll do our best to get to as many as possible. If we don't get to some of them, but we can answer them later, we will make sure that we post them again on that burnabypcn.ca website. We're fortunate today to have a couple of family physicians from Burnaby with us. Both Dr. Jennifer Moore and Dr. John Rideout worked together at Capitol Hill Medical since 2011. Dr. Rideout practiced family medicine in Burnaby from 1974 to 2022 and has recently retired at the end of last year. Graduated from McGill Medical in 1973 and did a brief locum in his father's practice in 74. His father was a long-serving family physician in Burnaby. For those of you who are sort of my age, you'll remember the first Dr. Rideout, or the last Dr. Rideout as well. From 74 to 75, he worked with Canadian universities overseas in a small medical clinic in Sierra Leone and returned to active practice in Burnaby in 76. He's previously served as the chair of the pediatric department of Burnaby Hospital, as the chair of the pharmacy committee for Fraser Health, and also served as a general member of the BC Pharmacy Committee. He sits on the board of the Burnaby Division of Family Practice. He's always had an interest in sports medicine and was the site physician for the Federation Cup finals in West Vancouver in 1987, and served as team physician for the Canadian Davis Cup team through the early 1990s. And perhaps he's best known as being the lead singer for the medically based malpractice R&B rock band, a very hot local sensation. So, along with Dr. Rideout, we have Dr. Jennifer Moore. She began her practice in Burnaby in 1993. As part of her practice, she has a keen interest in obstetrics. She cites getting to know her patients through their stories as one of the things she enjoys most about family medicine. Dr. Moore serves as the chair of the Department of OBSGYN at Burnaby Hospital for 5 years, served multiple terms on the Burnaby Division of Family Practice Board of Directors, and continues to contribute her time to physician leadership roles and committees for both the Burnaby Division and the Burnaby Primary Care Networks, where she currently sits on the Hastings-Brentwood local leadership table. Really welcome both Dr. Moore and Dr. Rideout. And also, I'll take a little time later to introduce the staff from the PCN. We have Robbie Lacuna, Gian Kunanen, and Georgina Aoka, and I think I may have missed those names, and I'm going to ask them to repeat them when I do give them some time. But to start out, I'd like to pass it over to Dr. Rideout.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm going to try to sort of share two perspectives. The first idea, of course, is to give some patients some perspective on what happens when your doctor retires. And I think it's important to have the patients understand what's involved in our retirement, what we go through, et cetera, at least what I went through. I'm going to speak on a personal note. You know, there are lots of jokey commentaries on retirement. I think the saying I love the most is someone once said that it isn't rocket science, it's way more difficult than that. And that always is a worrisome kind of statement. But like graduation and marriage and children, et cetera, it certainly is one of life's major milestones. I'm really a beginner at this, so you're talking to anything but an expert, but I'm going to give you a little bit of my perspective and the medical perspective that I admittedly am a little late to the party, having graduated in '73, so I'm closing in on my 50th year of medical practice, which seemed to go by remarkably quickly. One of the things that occurred is tremendous sort of burnout and fatigue is always there in general practice. It was about 7 or 8 years ago, my partner and I, my partner being Dr. Jürgen Rau, who was somewhat a couple of years older than I am, decided we would try to ease the burden by combining our practices and practicing in what we termed as a semi-retirement or step-down practice. This, in my view, allowed us to continue another 6 or 7 years of medical practice serving our patients. And this was an interesting way of doing things. I'm sure patients who are our patients know about this. I would work Thursday, Friday each week. He would work Monday, Tuesday, and we alternated Wednesdays. So we each worked 10 days a month, but it allowed us to serve patients 5 days a week, which was nice. But the patient load was extraordinary, about 3,200 patients in that combined practice. The rate limiting step, although we're there 5 days a week, the rate limiting step is always the fact that you can only see so many people a day in a reasonable manner. So, but it did allow us time to enjoy some of the interests and develop other interests, which are important to the longevity of a practice. So about 2 years ago, I think I began the process of real retirement, of full retirement. My patients had been concerned that I was going to retire somewhere between the last 5 and 10 years, but what happened 2 years ago, I decided I would retire, and I realized this was going to take some patience and most importantly, some recruitment of the Division of Family Practice in Burnaby, who were immensely helpful. And I just quickly give a little shout out to Robbie and Erica, who were most helpful in finding somebody to take the practice. So I felt a very strong obligation to make sure I had somebody to take my practice. And I really didn't understand how long this would take. There were 3 individuals over the course of time that were sensible and suitable candidates. Each of them came and went, and finally a 4th physician stepped up and took the challenge. And she was gradually worked into the practice over the last 4 months or so. I think, Jennifer, that would be when Ashna came in. And so she transitioned into the practice, which was great. She's finding it remarkably difficult, but she's also enjoying it. And I think one of the things that was interesting, she said to me that taking over a practice, she much preferred to taking on a whole new practice, because all these patients were basically, they were documented and they had a history and they were in the charts already. She knew already a lot about them. She much preferred that to taking on 1,200 new patients, which is great for a transition into a transitioning practice, but not great for patients looking for a new doctor. I think the things that stand out in my mind that are really promising is the new fee schedule. I think is very tempting. Unfortunately, it may attract patients or doctors from other provinces. And the fact is, I think we're going to find bringing back trained nationals, so Canadians who have trained in other medical schools abroad may return much more easily over the next year or two. I really think that's opening up, and that's going to open up a lot of, hopefully a lot of new practices, a lot of new physicians coming online. I think I'll leave it at that.
Sorry. Thanks, John. And just before I'd like to hear what Jennifer's perspective is still, as someone who's still in practice, maybe starting to think about it, but has also seen you and your partner go through it. But before, I just wanted to ask you, so how did you communicate this with your patients as you went through this? Did you, I mean, it wasn't a, as you said, it wasn't a flip of the switch kind of thing. It wasn't like a year ago you said, okay, I'm going to retire. I'm letting you know I'm going to be gone in a year. This took some time to think through. And did you have conversations with your patients as you went through?
Absolutely. So 2 years ago, I began the conversation with my patients, saying I was in the process of retiring, and I gave them, I hoped it wasn't false reassurance that I was going to find somebody to take the practice. And we had somebody on the line who was going to take it, a physician from the United States, for at least 15 months of that time. Unfortunately, that fell through. But I felt strongly that we were going to find somebody, and with the help of the division, which was immensely helpful, we did. But I set that conversation in motion at least 2 years ago, and I would have to say that of all the things my patients thank me for, the most outstanding thing is the fact that I found somebody to look after their medical care.
And I'm sure, I'm sure if you, when you talk to them, their biggest concern was finding somebody, was in fact having a doctor to transition to. But did they express other concerns to you when you talked to them, as when you asked them, when you talked to them about it?
I was surprised. I was surprised by how keen they were on whoever was going to come in. And they didn't say, is this person really well? Some people asked occasionally, is this your choice of patient, your choice of physician? I said, there are no choices out there. You take somebody when they walk across the threshold, you embrace them. But people they're all well qualified today, in my view, and they're not going to practice the same kind of medicine that you do, but they may practice very different, but even better medicine. Who knows? But the fact that they're there speaks volumes to the fact that they're dedicated to this, and patients, by and large, were happy just to know somebody was coming.
Did you have, given that it was in your own office, I'm sure it made it easier, but is the transferal of records an issue for retiring doctors, or for patients for that matter?
Well, so all of that was outlined, and we set out two form letters. The first of those was to say I was retiring. When this was an established fact, I sent that out. And one of the things it explained is, if you wish to stay with the practice, your records will remain. I told people all that's going to happen is there'll be a different person in this chair talking to you in the future. Your records remain the same. If you wish to transfer records, that was all laid out carefully in the form letter. The other thing we did was also Dr. Sood, who took my place, put out a letter on her own explaining where she was from, what her perspective was, et cetera. And that was very helpful. I think it right away introduced, there's 1,600 patients in my practice. I think my average age is around 71 years old. And these letters went out to everybody, and I think they were very appreciated because they set the tone.
Right. So they were ready by the time you left. They were ready.
Yep.
Do you have any idea? I'm going to go to you in a second, Jennifer. Do you have any idea how many patients stayed with the doctor that came in to take your place, or how many didn't?
I think it was no more than 2 handfuls of patients left. I'm talking 6 or 7, 8 patients. That's it, out of 1,600, as far as I know.
The same amount of patients that might leave on an annual basis anyway, I would imagine.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great, thank you. We're going to have more questions for you. Jennifer, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, I guess I'm still a couple of steps behind John, in the sense that, yes, of course, I am thinking about retiring. I'm certainly of that age. As my patients like to point out, since I delivered many of their children, and their children are now 25 or so, they realize that I must also be getting on as well. And I think, watching John and Jürgen go through it, and particularly in these days, it's no longer like you put a sign out, as I was able to do, because I actually started my practice in Halifax and then left after 5 years to move to the West Coast. And at that point, you could interview people to come and take over your practice. And so it's a very different market now. I think the other thing that sort of came to everyone's mind was this year, when we were doing our annual licensing, one of the questions that was added from the licensing body was, if you died tomorrow, what would happen with your records? And I think it made everyone step back and say, okay, I really do want to have a plan for successioning that, if need be, could perhaps, come in a pinch. But I think and when you start to think about all the things that you need to do, and John alluded to some of those, but certainly one of the big issues for me was around the charts, because number one is I came from a practice when I joined John and the group. They had already converted to an electronic medical record, but I hadn't at that time. And so I still had all these paper charts, which the college expects that you keep those or keep access to those charts for 16 years after the last visit with the patient. And if it happens to be minor, then it's up until the age of 35. So the age of majority plus 16 years. Realizing that having paper charts was not going to be tenable on the long run, I had started to get many of them converted, but it was a big process. So just to, again, to reassure the patients that we are taking care of those charts, that they should be accessible. There are now companies where you can have everything scanned, but then the patients have to pay to get them out. And unfortunately, my experience has been with those companies when I requested a chart, the chart often comes, well, I got one that was 430 pages and not really very, and not succinct at all. It was simply the whole chart copied. So obviously it's a huge advantage if you can find someone to take over your practice in the same location, and you don't have to worry as much about the charts. Again, as John said, we don't get to choose necessarily, but we've had a lot of help over the years from the division in trying to find physicians. And I've certainly been talking to others and trying to figure out how to do it. I did slowly cut back my practice. About 5 years ago, I stopped doing obstetrics, and that had been a part. So rather than take on a whole or fill up my panel at that point, I kept it. And I had gone to half time with someone else from our practice who also managed to retire several years ago. And she happened to be lucky finding somebody who was not in a position that they particularly liked to join our practice, which is we've been grateful for. I think the other thing that patients really need to know is that we all intend to find somebody to take over our practice. That's always our hope. But we're also getting older, and so sometimes that isn't the option. I know many years ago in the practice that someone became ill in the present practice that we're in and had to leave practice, and I know that they scrambled to find somebody on a different time schedule than planning it. So if, I think we always have to keep that in mind. What would we do if tomorrow I couldn't practice? Would my colleagues be able to step up and take the practice? I rather doubt it. But also looking at my practice, I realized there's several things, and John probably came across this too when he was retiring, is that many of our patients have moved, and that's created an issue in some ways, both with college but also with us, in that patients have retired, they've moved to the Okanagan, they've moved to the island, particularly the island. They're scrambling to find a family physician, so they hang on to us, and really the college doesn't really want us doing that, and I certainly understand that. But I also don't expect patients to be going to emergency rooms to get refills on their antihypertensives. So while I think that's one of the things that needs to be thought about when I come to retire, if someone is taking over my practice, is that probably the appropriate time to encourage these patients to seek out help in finding a physician closer to home. And that's been one of the things about the divisions of family practice, is they all are supposed to have a plan for attachment, and they are funded to do so through the provincial government. So even though they may not advertise, and certainly the Burnaby division does, and perhaps Jan will want to speak to that later, we do at least have a list a list that patients can go on who need family physicians. So I think people need to keep that in mind. Also, sometimes, and I'm running into this now, where I get women, or sometimes even partners, saying, would I take them on because their physician has retired? And I warn them that yes, on the short run, because I don't know what's going to happen. I might be happy to do it. It seems appropriate to keep family members together. But again, that's not a long-term solution. So if someone on the short run at least needs to find a family physician, that, getting your best friend or your grandmother's physician might be another route. But it's a very complicated process, as John has outlined, and I don't think any of us do it at the last minute. And again, I always try to reassure patients that I would not suddenly leave unless it was circumstances beyond my control.
That's great, thank you. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes up in there for me. I mean, I think that there will be a question that is that, I think what people need to know is that for most doctors, any that I've met, family doctors, they don't take retiring, they take it quite seriously what the impact will be, and they try to plan it as best they possibly can. The trick is, as you've heard from both Dr. Moore and Dr. Rideout, is that the supply of family doctors to take those roles on is not as strong as, frankly, the number of doctors who we see retiring. So that's a challenge. Hopefully there's some positive things coming, but that is a challenge that we're all facing right now. I think that a question that I'd have for both of you is, what should patients be doing if they perceive their family doctors are retiring? Are there things that they can prepare to do and be proactive about? I will share my own anecdotal piece. When my doctor retired, I had a doctor for 38 years. And when they retired, I was offered another doctor, and I should have noted that doctor was the same age as I was. That was a strategic error on my part. And I think that's because certainly then they retired too, and now the supply isn't as such that I can easily do that. But I'm curious, are there things that patients can do to prepare themselves? And Jennifer, your point is a good one. We don't know what happens in life. What happens if your doctor leaves? Are there things that patients can do to prepare themselves and to start to be proactive around that? Yeah, John.
Well, Jennifer alluded to something in a lot of my patients, where a husband and wife, for instance, go to different physicians. Often a physician will take on a family member. Certainly I did that over the course of time. It was a slow leak. It just, you take a person here, a person there, a person here and there, and it was never overwhelming. So the idea that you press your husband into trying to get you in to see their physician is really worthwhile doing. That can work, and it's just something which you should keep in mind. Or friends. My son and his wife and daughter live across the street from a general practitioner in Comox, where they just moved to, and of course, this is a relationship which hopefully will allow them to attend this physician at some point. So, and I suspect that's exactly what will happen. So there are ways and means of looking, shaking the bushes a little bit and finding availability. I do think we're going to see more and more physicians coming into practice. I think that's going to be quite different with the release of foreign graduates, foreign nationals returning to, and the new fee guide is going to be really, really positive. So, but I haven't any magic in that. I alluded earlier to the idea of I think something we could do as a division is talk to the physicians in our catchment area about the idea of the semi-retirement, the idea of extending your practice another 5, 6, or 7 years by sort of stepping down a little bit. So you remain in practice and you're still servicing your patients, but people are being assigned. I have a patient who I've followed in Nanaimo for years. She continues to be my patient, although a year ago, after waiting 4 years, she now has a physician in Nanaimo. So that is happening. So.
And the other question, just kind of along those lines, if I find myself without a physician, my family doctor leaves for whatever reason that may be, this is that medical records question. What happens when I walk into a walk-in clinic, for instance? Are they able to access, how much of my medical records are those folks able to access?
Jennifer, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, that's sort of an interesting question, Jeff. If they have access to something called PharmaNet, they can at least pull up the list of medications that have been supplied to that particular patient. Now, I don't know how often that actually happens in the walk-in clinic situation, because that's probably fairly time consuming. And part of it is seeing the volume, and that's what patients want. I mean, they want a quick in and out usually when they go to a walk-in clinic, unless they have no option because they can't find a family physician. But I mean, and theoretically, if these patients, continue to go to the same, call it a walk-in clinic or whatever, repeatedly, after 2 or 3 times, then that could actually become their patient medical home. So hopefully, the clinic would get more and more information about them. I mean, they can always request it. The issue I found increasingly, and in days gone by when we had a paper chart, I would go through the paper chart and usually just send what I felt was the most important. There's no reason to send 20 years of normal mammograms, for instance, right? Sending the last one is or sometimes if your notes are illegible, there's not much point in forwarding your notes. I often wouldn't do that. I often select out consultants' reports or whatever. But patients can themselves also request get a copy of their chart, which in some cases may be perfectly reasonable, particularly if they're moving, say somewhere else in BC, and they are hoping to approach another physician, they can start by handing off that chart. I think might be helpful. Again, patients don't often think about those things, but certainly they are entitled to have that record transferred at any time, and they are entitled to have a copy, unless we feel there's something in there that might be negative about their health. But nevertheless, most of the time we're usually happy to give them a copy of the chart. I guess the other thing too, Jeff, that I would just say, to my patients now, when I find that they have moved away, and I would even say that to patients who now live in, say, Abbotsford and what have you, that it's worthwhile them getting their name on a list with a physician closer by. And I think part of the reason for that is, and then I find this, the further away the patients get, the harder it is for them, or the less likely they want to come to the office. And while we have telemed, it is not always appropriate. Many times you need to see those patients in person. And in fact, I was joking with Erica, who's our our runner and be all of that we really should have a marketplace where I would take a patient who's come down from living here now with her family from the Sunshine Coast, I'd take that person if they'd take one of my patients that's moved to the Sunshine Coast. That's another possible step, and would obviously, I could imagine, creates a fair amount of work for someone. But I wonder sometimes if there isn't a flow of patients back and forth, and if there isn't a way around that, where people in Burnaby could take people who are living in Burnaby now, if someone would take their patient who lives in Abbotsford or Chilliwack or Prince George, or you name it.
And I think that point that you made, I mean, it's interesting, and I'm gonna ask Jan to talk a little bit about his role and how it works, how the list works in Burnaby in a second. But it's that idea. The path of least resistance when you move is to say, well, nobody's got doctors here anyway, so I might as well just stay with my doctor wherever I may be. But the truth is, you're better served with the doctor in your own community, and there's no reason not to be on a list. Even frankly, if you're on the list and your name comes up and they come and they say, and you don't want that, don't want to do it, you don't have to go to do that. But there is validity in it because it will serve you better, and frankly serve the system better too. So there's something there. A couple other questions coming up, but first of all, I would like to turn it over to Jan. Jan, I just wonder if you can just let folks know exactly what your role is, and then how the system works in Burnaby around when you don't have a doctor.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gian. I'm the patient attachment coordinator for the Burnaby Division of Family Practice, as mentioned. And I have worked with a few doctors that have recently retired from their practice and helping them transition their patients to other doctors. I know there is right now an issue of capacity for new doctors. There's not that many new doctors starting their practice as against those doctors that have recently retired, as well as new people coming into Burnaby looking for a family doctor. So our wait list is quite huge at this point, and I know some of you may have already gone to our website, because I see the question. One of the questions do in fact mention the fact that the wait time is long. Yeah, and it could take about a year for some patients to actually be matched with a patient. But what we do with the doctors that are retiring is that way before they're set to retire, we do ask them to give us a list of patients that are sort of have complex care issues that may need to be seen by a doctor more regularly, as opposed to those that only come in for routine checkups, so that we are able to put them on a priority list, so that we are able to match them to a new doctor once their current doctor retires. Now, we do have other ways to be matched to a doctor, to be put on our list, and the main one essentially is for those that are looking for a family doctor. They go on our website and fill out an application form where they put in their information as well as their family members, so that we would be able to match them to a family doctor. And we do have limitations. Some patients do prefer to have doctors close to their homes. Unfortunately, that cannot always be possible. You may have to travel across Burnaby, but it'll always be within Burnaby at least, so you don't have to travel all the way to Abbotsford with for a new doctor. Yeah, so we will find you a doctor within Burnaby. I know if you got used to traveling 5 minutes to see your doctor, it may take you 15 minutes this time or 20 minutes. But yeah, it'll still within Burnaby.
Thanks, Jan. And actually, maybe Georgiana, you could introduce yourself as well, and just talk about a little bit about, I think one of the things that Jan alluded to there is, the list is not simply the first on, first off kind of a list. There's a certain amount of prioritization based on need in there as well. And then I've got John with a comment too. Go ahead, Georgiana.
It's a question.
Oh,
sure.
Let's go, Georgiana, then I'll come to you, John, if that's okay. That's great, thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Georgiana Yoika. I'm the Burnaby PCN Central Intake Lead. I oversee the Burnaby PCN referral processes as well as the patient attachment initiative. For patient attachment, in terms of priority, we do have two referral streams. The first referral stream, which is for higher priority, more complex healthcare needs. For this patient category, we ask our referring entities to complete our Burnaby Patient Attachment Initiative referral form and have the completed form faxed to us, to Burnaby Patient Attachment Initiative. For routine healthcare needs, we kindly ask patients to visit our website and complete and submit a self-referral online form. So those referrals received by fax are treated as higher priority, and patients are attached in priority sequence. However, for both referral streams, we cannot guarantee a timeline for attachment.
And I guess that, in in the best of times, when and we're going to talk a little bit more about supply and the potential for new doctors coming in, there's an opportunity to begin to match around particular types of care that might be provided, or particularly around particular, whether it's cultural or language, and certainly often we have folks looking for particular gender identity with their doctors, and those opportunities can come along. But my understanding is right now we're kind of, because of supply, it's much more difficult to do that. Yeah, John, go ahead. Sorry.
Just a question for Jan. Is the BC College also a resource for available physicians, or for physicians that are taking new patients?
Yes, so the college website does provide the information and addresses of doctors that are practicing, but it does not actually identify which ones have capacity to accept new patients. So right now, yeah, the best way actually is to fill out our online form, and we will match them accordingly. We do have a Robbie Lacuna, I'm sure will be introduced soon. That helps with recruiting new doctors to Burnaby.
Yeah, it's interesting, John. You kind of point to for a period of time there have been a number of different places where people can look for a family doctor. And doctors have made their availability, some through the college site, and they've been asked to, and some have and some haven't. And now it seems as if the shift is to a more locally based, I think, as Jennifer alluded to, there's funding in place for all of the divisions of family practice and all of the communities in BC to take on this kind of role. So I think that my understanding is that the emphasis now is on trying to do it locally from a patient point of view, so that people are all coming through the same door in a given community. So we'll see how that works out.
I was going to say, I think the college has tried to sort of get out of listing physicians, because I think they didn't have anybody who would keep it updated. So physicians would end up with a full panel, and they were still being called like 2 and 3 years later in some instances. So I don't tend to refer my patients there. I don't think, it may not be successful, I guess, is the bottom line.
Yeah.
And the other comment I will make is, while it's pretty clear on the Burnaby website that we have an attachment system, it is not clear on some of the other websites. And so, when I have patients who have moved, particularly into Vancouver, and some of them are way over, by UBC, I encourage them to actually phone the division in Vancouver, because I had gone on their website several times to look to see if it's transparent, and it is not. And yet all of these divisions are reporting to government about how many they've attached in any given year. So I guess that's just my other word of wisdom to the patients, that if it's not easily apparent on the website of that division, then give them a call or track somebody down.
And you can certainly connect back through the Burnaby division or through that list if you like. I will say, I guess just going to one of the issues that was, so this is really guidance for patients who are looking for a doctor. You can look in those other places. One of the issues with the college registry was, A, they didn't necessarily have the resources to keep it up to date, but B, physicians were often reluctant to put their availability on that site, because they would get people from all across the province looking for a doctor, and they would be overwhelmed by requests. And so that's very challenging. I think that what happens in Burnaby is we have folks like Jan and Georgiana and Erica and Robbie, who have a relationship with the doctors in the community. So it's not simply based on the numbers, it's based on a conversation. And sometimes they spoke to, if a doctor is retiring, then they're most vulnerable. Often the doctors who are retiring have some patients who are quite a bit older and quite vulnerable. Those needs we're able to ensure that those needs are met, even by asking doctors who may not actually have any visible capacity to take on 1 or 2 patients. So that's relational. And that's the critical piece of the value of that in Burnaby. And so I think that you should know that if you put your name on that registry, I say there's a question, it's like, seems like they'll never be matched. I think you'll find that you will be matched, and that there will be more doctors coming, and that it's also not simply a matter of when your number comes up. It's an ongoing effort and relationship based. Robbie, maybe I can ask you to introduce yourself as well and talk a little bit about that the recruitment process, and also and what you see as coming down the pipe in the next little while about doctors in Burnaby.
Thanks, Jeff. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robbie Lacuna. I am the Recruitment and Retention and Data Management Coordinator for the Burnaby Division of Family Practice. My role in the division is to help recruit physicians as well as support current physicians that are practicing, as well as physicians looking to retire in the future. Basically, I work closely with the local clinics, find out what kind of physicians they're looking for, how many physicians they're looking for, and basically I help match interested physicians, whether they're from BC or international graduates, find clinics in Burnaby that fits their needs and their wants. I try my best to match physicians to clinics that are a good match, really, so that these physicians don't end up leaving. And then if they do leave, we're back to square one. So I'm really trying my best to ensure that we match them with the correct and the right clinic. As far as processes, I help match clinics through a website called Health Match, wherein interested physicians are able to apply for clinic posts, clinic ads that I've created on behalf of the clinics. I help these physicians with their paperwork, with regards to the college, their licensing, their MSP numbers. So these are all the supports that I help new physicians. As far as retiring physicians, I did, as Dr. Rideout said, we were helping him for the longest time find a physician that would take over his practice. And as you mentioned, there was one physician that was we were looking forward to for 15 months, but unfortunately it did not go through. But we did not give up. I won't give up, and I will try my best to find retiring physicians, someone that can take over their practice.
And I think that's real. It's interesting. So just from a perspective of a British Columbia perspective, almost every community in BC is in this same place where there are not enough doctors to meet the current need, and B, they have doctors who are retiring, and so that they're almost every community is effectively looking for doctors to replace and to replenish. I think that, I can give you some perspective. Some of the things that the division and the primary care network are doing are not simple. There's this great work that Robbie and Jan and Georgiana are doing, but there's also this sort of system work that's trying to create a more supportive system for family doctors in Burnaby, so that doctors find it a more attractive place to practice. And there's the potential for some mentoring and training for new doctors as they come in a new center that will be open in the next year. There's the potential for offering a fair amount of support in doctors coming in and learning to practice in new ways of practice, like team-based care, which is another way that we see a system piece that we see that will begin to create more capacity. There's a question here, which is about what's preventing new graduates from entering in or taking on family practice. This is kind of an opinion piece. It's what needs to happen to encourage more incoming GPs. I'm wondering whether John or Jennifer, you might want to comment on that.
Well, I think it's a very long and probably somewhat complicated issue, but I think two things. John alluded to the pay system. We until recently were falling behind, I guess I would say, our colleagues, and certainly falling behind, I think, in what we were being paid for, which was primarily just to see a patient. but now we're actually also being paid for our time because one of the things that's escalated has been the paperwork over the last number of years. But I think there's two issues. One is the issue that the number when I graduated, and it was probably the case when John did, about 70% of the graduating class was going into family practice. It's now, I think, the request, and in fact, I saw these stats just recently, the request for family practice residencies is about 30, somewhere in the 30%, 30 to 38% of a graduating class. So, and you also have to realize that none of the medical schools that I've ever been able to get their stats actually do any stats of what happens to physicians 10 years out. In other words, is there an issue? And I put that out there, is there an issue with the individuals that we're selecting to go to medical school? I don't have an answer for that, but I think it's a question that needs to be addressed as well. But yes, I think a lot of it is just sheerly the numbers, which has then put more pressure on us trying to figure out what we do with the international medical graduates, whether they are Canadians trained abroad or whether they are trained abroad and have come to live in and are now Canadian citizens. And I think many of you have probably seen, the physician from the Ukraine, the physician from Serbia who hasn't been able to get licensed here, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, that's a complicated issue, and I don't particularly, I'm not particularly the person to go into that, but I would say that that's something we're still trying to do as how do we smooth this. The other thing we're looking at is getting licensing across Canada so that physicians can move across the country. I happen to have a child who is who is a physician, is working up in Iqaluit. For her to come and work in BC, she still maintains her license, but she's paying a fair amount of money to do so. And if she comes for extended period, she has to go through more paperwork to say that she's in good standing in both places before she comes and practices. So there's lots of barriers out there that I think genuinely we are trying to address. And hopefully we'll ease this, even if we can get physicians who may be prepared, as John said, or talked about briefly about, retiring physicians who might be prepared to do sort of locums here and there, if necessary, for a week or two, being able to maintain their license. So lots of possibilities, but lots of issues too.
I just want to be clear that John is not taking patients, just to just be really clear on that. I think and it's interesting, some of the things that you talked about, Jennifer, and for folks who aren't aware on the payment model, I mean, it does change the way family doctors are paid or can be paid. Rather than being paid for the moment they see you and only that moment, they're actually being paid for the relationship they have with you, is a way that I would say. And they're also, I mean, one of the, and so I'd be interested in your comments, and John, maybe you can come as sort of a rear view mirror comment for you a little bit, John, the advent of team-based care and how that will change family practice. Because one of the things that this new payment model will allow is it will allow family doctors to more easily work with a team of people, other nurse practitioners, or with other allied health professionals like registered nurses or physiotherapists or others. John, I don't know if you've thought about that at all, just how that change do you see that change impacting family practice?
Well, it's certainly very different than the culture that I was basically raised in medical care, but I can see the advantages of that. And if you look at the United States, many general practitioners have a physician's assistant who works with them, and that can be extremely helpful. And that sort of thing can be maybe something we can develop over time. I certainly don't see so part of the solution being taking foreign graduates from other countries that lose good, talented people to come to Canada. I think the solution lies in paying this profession properly. When you look at the sort of hours I put in when I was in full time, it was close to 55 to 60 hours a week. When you work that out on an hourly basis, it's not impressive. But this is a very expensive city to live in. And the only reason you could make sufficient money to sort of live here and purchase a home and do the things you want to do, living in BC and particularly in Vancouver, is by working long hours and seeing lots of patients. That's not the answer. So paying the profession properly is a good start. And I think there's lots of room yet to go on this to make it work much better. So, but as far as the team-based care, I see lots of advantages to that. But, you know, you still has to be a certain amount of throughput. You do have to sort of roll up your sleeves and get to work sometimes. And that's important not to lose sight of. You know, anyway, I don't want to get into that too much, but I think that, yeah, so that, I hope that answers I mean, I think the team-based care has lots of promise, and I think it depends on how you design it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting times, you know. I mean, it really is big change for folks to start to, all folks, whether it's all the nurse practitioner or all the folks who are working in health, to start to work in a team, on a team basis. But it does seem as if there's some opportunities there. Well, we're just about at time. I just want to if there's a question in here around registering for a doctor through 811. I don't believe that you can. And that being said, to be honest, the best you would do if you were to register for a doctor through 811 would be to join a provincial registry, which is likely probably the least likely way to find a new doctor. I think if you register locally and maybe I can ask Jen or Georgiana to put it just in the chat, maybe post the website in the chat, and there's a website. There's also a phone number, isn't there? Is there a phone number as well? Yeah.
Yes, the best way would be to register online and fill out their form that would have.
What about people who don't have access to online?
Yes, the phone number would be available for them as well on our website. But yeah, if they can do it online, that's the best way.
Sure, but then the folks who don't have access, or what about language? What about folks who speak different languages? Are there options for registering at all, or for connecting?
Well, they would need to be speaking English to register.
Okay.
But as far as finding a doctor that speaks a different language, we try to accommodate it if available. So they could state their preferences for a doctor that speaks a different language, but unfortunately, that's not always going to be available. I know there are doctors that use the provincial language services if they see patients that are that have English as their second language, but it's not as efficient as having their own translator come with them. A family member that speaks English, that would be the best.
Great, thanks, John.
I just want to emphasize to patients the value of networking. I think we underestimate it. This is talking to friends, to neighbors, to relatives. If every GP in this province took 10 more people, how many GPs are there in BC? Jennifer, do you know that answer?
I think it's around 6,000. Yeah.
Multiply that by 10 people. I mean, could I take 10 people in my practice at any time? Of course I could. And when my third partner, Dr. Rhodes, retired, there were a number of patients of his that were what we call the lost lambs. They were complex patients, and he asked if my other partner, Jurgen, and I could take these patients on, and we took each of us about 10 or 20 patients. You know, when you're adding that to 1,600 patients, it's nothing. So I think the networking is important. People can, I mean, every GP could take another 10 people if you want to look at it like that. It's just something that I think shouldn't be lost. Talk to people, push people a little bit. You may find you get a GP through that method as well. So worth doing.
Yeah, take some patient responsibility in there, and that's reasonable. It's your health, sort of thing.
Yes, thank you so much for that as well. I wanted to say that with the fact that we do have a mechanism in Burnaby for attaching patients, we don't want patients to just fully rely on that. If they could actually ask for look for family doctors on their own as well, maybe even outside of Burnaby, then that might help them get a doctor faster.
Just another quick comment is that I think the Burnaby Public Library is also willing to help patients get the number or may even help. But I know if someone doesn't have access to computer, the public libraries are usually very good at helping those individuals. So I'm sure they could bring up the website and get them the telephone number. So that's another possible resource.
It's a great point, and they absolutely will. And in fact, some of the social agencies, Burnaby Neighborhood House and Mosaic, will support folks with the process and also with language. There is a quick question that just came up. This is around patient records, and it's what happens if I don't have a family doctor, or if my family doctor retires, doesn't find a replacement? Those records go to a repository. In order for my new doctor to get those records, do they have to pay for those?
Unfortunately, the answer is correct, is yes.
Yeah. It's unfortunately, that's a system that we're in right now. So I think I guess the reason I bring it up is, honestly, these are all of the systems that are being looked at right now as to what's appropriate with this. And I think the person who asked the question, your point is a really good one. It's a challenge, and it's a challenge that shouldn't be there. I think yes, there's a question around on the North Shore. Yes, if you go to the division, the North Shore Division of Family Practice, you'll find that they have a registry as well. So I think we're at time. Are there any comments or questions, Jennifer or John, before we leave? Well, I really want to thank everyone. First of all, the folks who've joined us, the participants for coming and your interest, and the staff from the division and the primary care network, and Dr. Rideout and Dr. Moore. This has been a great session. I think that, and again, I think the message to folks who are the people coming on the call is that there's an awful lot of work going on in Burnaby, both in terms of finding you a particular doctor and also ensuring that we have doctors in Burnaby for the long term. So please, and any role that you can take in engaging the process is always really valuable to us. So again, a reminder that if you'd like to see a recording of this, will be on the burnabypcn.ca website. Give us a couple of days. It won't happen that quickly, but it will be up there. And with that, I think I just thank you all again. Have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy the sunshine. It's actually sunny out there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye all.